As the white light faded into the black monoliths, the darkness slowly shifted to white, and then colors began to dance across the vision of an unconscious mind. Colors formed shapes, and Elias shot up from his prone state. He looked around frantically, hoping to find his newfound companion, but found himself wincing at the pain that buzzed through his shoulder.
"Easy there,"
a calm male voice said. Elias winced again at the light of Rosier reflecting off of the armor of he who spoke. Before him stood a man in resplendent armor, silvered in the light of the morning, with a grand white tabard flowing down his cuirass.
"You're in no condition to be panicking like that,"
the calm voice said. The young mercenary coughed as he pushed himself up. He reached the stabbing pain in his shoulder. Where's... Controlled words spoke from under a closed helm.
"Your friend is fine. You too are quite lucky we found you. Damn bandits."
Elias shook his head, his vision growing hazy as he did so. His fingers touched his forehead and met a wet stain. He looked down, seeing the crimson of his lifeblood upon his fingers.
"You're still injured. I ask you to stay calm."
The young man reached down and touched his neck, feeling the familiar feel of his flesh. His fingers slid down to his shoulder, and he felt the stabbing pain of the injury where the crossbow bolt buried its way into his shoulder. No steel. He looked up to the man before him. "Where's my armor?" The armored figure gave a light shrug, silvered pauldrons rattling against chainmail and solid steel.
"I do not know. Taken, I suppose."
Elias felt another sting, one of woe, run down his spine. He pressed the palm of his hand against his forehead. The armored man shook his head.
"Sorry, friend. They were too quick."
The young mercenary looked down to his shoulder, trembling with emotions beyond anything he could comprehend at this moment. The crossbow wound was bandaged, much to his surprise.
"We touched you up as much as we could. Though, alas, we're only a patrol of knights and no Templar, so we must rely on conventional healing."
Elias looked around, now realizing there were several armored figures patrolling the area, but not seeing any Accieri. What happened? The knight looked Elias up and down, checking for more injuries.
"You were jumped by bandits, it seems. We found you before much else could have been done, beyond robbery. I'm thankful we got there when we did."
Elias rubbed his head again. "And who are you, then, to come to our aid?" A gauntleted fist rattled against steel as the individual snapped into a salute.
"Sir Atos II, Knight Lieutenant of the Knights of the Dawn."
He gestured over toward the other two knights within Elias's vision.
"This is Sir Lofton the Eighth, and Sir Harrod, Sir Hargrow the Fourth, is looking after your friend."
The young man stared at his savior in shock. "Knights of the Dawn? I've only heard tales." Laughter echoed from under his closed helm.
"Don't be surprised, friend. We patrol these roads often."
Elias took a heavy breath, and needles passed through his ribs. He coughed as he clutched his chest. He felt a gauntlet gently placed on his shoulder.
"You have to take it easy, friend. You're gonna hurt yourself if you keep panicking like that."
The helmeted man glanced over his shoulder.
"Sir Lofton, let Sir Hargrow know that the boy's awake, all right?"
Sir Lofton gave a grim nod.
"I'll go fetch Hargrow and his dagger-eared patient," he said, bitterly.
Sir Atos simply shook his head and looked back at Elias.
"We're gonna make your girl aware that you're well. Pay Sir Lofton no mind."
Elias lowered his eyes and leaned back on his hands, feeling the grasp between his fingers. He sighed, looking at his knees, covered in studded leather as they were. Then his eyes widened, and he reached down to his belt. No sword. My sword! The knight turned around.
"Sword? It had none when we arrived. I suppose it, too, was taken.
Elias buried his face in his hands, not daring to look up until he heard footsteps approaching him. "Elias?" a familiar voice asked. He slowly, carefully looked up. He saw his would-be companion standing before him. Her armor was different, baggier than he remembered. It was clear that she saw his scrutiny, and she spoke with a slight tinge of self-consciousness. "The highwaymen we encountered took my armor, and my clothes, for that matter. These fellows were kind enough to supply me with something temporary." She carefully pulled at the shirt that was, visibly, far too large for her. She had already tied it in the back to fit better. The young man looked down. "My sword." "Your sword? My sword? My bow, my armor, my clothes!" Atia paused. "Money, Elias Thurlow." Elias hadn't even thought of it in his grief. "Money!" He looked up at Sir Atos. "Did you happen to—" The knight cut him off with a shake of his head.
"Unfortunately not."
Thurlow calmly pushed himself up to his feet, and, to his surprise, the Achiati spoke with a notable amount of concern. "Don't push yourself, Elias. You got quite injured in the attack." Elias groaned as he stood fully to his feet. I'm fine. We just need to keep moving." His companion nodded. "I agree, but you are in no condition to keep moving right now."
"We'll remain here and guard the perimeter, so that you may rest for the morning,"
Sir Atos suggested. The boy mercenary shook his head and clutched his shoulder.
"How far is Soother Hall from here?" 3 hours east on foot."
Elias raised his eyebrows. "We are closer than I thought." Sir Lofton cut in.
"We brought you closer, so that you could access our temporary camp. 'Twas Sir Argrove's idea. He always had a soft spot for daggers."
Another knight that Elias had noticed arriving with Atia shook his head in frustration, but Sir Atos spoke before his colleague could quarrel with Sir Lofton.
"Regardless, if you insist on traveling on foot, I would warn caution. Though you are likely safe this close, I believe the bandits have been properly scared away."
The young man clutched his shoulder and looked over at Atia with a sigh. "Are you okay?" Atia shrugged her shoulders, wreathed in a tunic too large for her. "I am. Bruises, mostly." She glanced at the knights, giving Sir Lofton a quick glare in the process. "Thank you all. I shudder to think what they would have done to me had you not arrived when you did." Sir Atos nodded.
"Thanks are not needed. We are doing as the Dawn does."
Elias spoke as well. "Well, please accept our thanks regardless. You've done us a great service, and I will not soon forget it." The knight nodded.
"You're welcome, then. Safe journeys to the both of you."
Thurlow gave a weak smile and looked at his Achiati companion. "I suppose we'll need to stop by a tailor in Soother Hall, Atia was uncomfortably fidgeting with the oversized clothes and simply nodded in agreement. Sir Hargrove approached suddenly and handed Elias a light hand axe.
"Sorry about your sword, but I'm sure this'll suffice. At least you still have most of your leather. I've already supplied Atia with a longsword."
Elias gingerly took the hand axe, weighing it in his palm. It was a simple axe, but Elias had done plenty of work to be at least a little comfortable with one of its weight. He latched it to his belt and glanced up to the knight. "I thank you for all that you've done." Metal rattled as the knight nodded.
"One moment,"
he said, and suddenly turned to walk to his horse, which was hitched to one of the nearby trees. He reached into his saddlebags and procured something that Elias could not see. The knight approached Elias and handed him a fairly square pouch.
"This is 1 day's supply of rations. If you're passing through Soother Hall, it would do plenty good. We can head back to Fort Dawnbreaker a day early. It won't hurt us none."
The young mercenary held the bag of rations in his hand, looking at it silently. He was at a loss for words. Even among the streets of Southerhall, he was rarely shown such kindness. He tied the bag to his belt and looked at Atia, who seemed to have settled into her armor rather well, although it also seemed a little too bulky for her lithe body. She gave a nod of confirmation. The Thurlow boy lifted his gaze to Sir Hargrow, then to Sir Atos one last time, and gave a low bow of his head. "I cannot think how else to thank you, sirs. I'll find a way to pay you or your order back in the future. But for now, we must hurry to Southerhall." Sir Atos, who was now upon his steed, raised a fist to his chest in a brisk salute, and gave a professional nod.
"Safe journeys, friend, and may each host guide your paths."